mystery theory. Today I'm gonna cover a case that was very much requested, and that it's kind of a long story, a very long case. So I read about this in a book, and I decided to finally kind of put together this case and share it. I don't know if it's gonna be part 1 and part 2. It kind of depends on my speed in this. And since it's a true crime case, but in an ASMR style, I just don't want to rush it. Let's talk about tiger parenting. But before I get into today's case, I would love for you to give a thumbs up to this video so more people can be suggested this case and this video in particular. And if you don't mind just leaving a comment, that would make my day. So if you can do that, thank you. And for those of you who are part of the Patreon family, there's a 3-part series available of unsolved mysteries finally solved. So please head on there and catch up with the latest. For those of you who are members, remember to enjoy this video ad-free. I'll have details in the description box and down below. Now back to tiger parenting. This is a term that you might have heard of. It's used to describe a style of parenting, the strict kind. Some people describe this parenting style as very demanding and very popular in the Chinese community. Every parent wants their child to achieve some kind of greatness in whatever they do. Sports, arts, academics. It's parents that use this style of parenting are described typically as a different kind of animal. They are kind of obsessive with their child's success, and they push their influence on their children to, some would say, the extreme. I met a couple that was that used this style of parenting. I don't know if they chose or that's how they were raised, but they were not Chinese. So all that to say that I'm sure this is not the only community that uses this style, okay? But let's make things a little bit more clear. You're expected, if you are a child of this tiger parents, you're supposed or expected to attend an Ivy League school like Harvard, Princeton, or Yale. They also kind of work around this, their children's marriage, like who might be a good candidate and who really is not worth of their child's love. Basically, their main goal is to have great jobs as a Wall Street lawyer, investment banker, or anything that pays a lot of money. And Huei, Han, Pan, and Bich, Pan were stereotypical tiger parents. They had immigrated to Toronto, Canada, as refugees, and his wife, Bich, came kids, Jennifer and Felix. They were very thrifty. They saved as much money as possible. And by the year 2004, they had $200,000 in the bank. And they owned a nice size home in a suburban neighborhood. The only thing that they were kind of fancy with were their cars. They had a Mercedes and a Lexus, and their main goal was to save enough money to send their kids to the best schools, and that they were eligible for possible scholarships. They wanted to make absolutely sure that Jennifer and Felix lived a more than plentiful life. Jennifer was the oldest, and she showed potential at an early age. By the age of 4, she was taking piano lessons, and she was great at it. While or during her elementary school years, she was figure skating, and it was said that in some evenings, Bich and Hann would keep her up practicing until 10 p.m. And not only that, but after 10, she would have to do her homework until midnight. Jennifer finally graduated middle school, and she was expected to be valedictorian, but was turned down. She was devastated because she knew what that meant for her parents. She had a lot of pressure, more than any girl really in her early teens should have. She even told her friends that she would just put on her happy mask, but that deep down she was suffering, and she was cutting herself. Jennifer attended high school at Mary Ward Catholic Secondary School in Toronto. It was very well known for a unique self-directed learning program, and they had this super high academic standards. She fitted well and got along with almost everyone, and her parents would continue to monitor after-school activities closely. She became an awesome swimmer, and she also practiced Kung Fu. She was in band, and she excelled at playing the flute. But soon enough, her skills in ice skating began to slip. And a second place in a competition was not good enough for her parents. At one point, she was an Olympic hopeful in figure skating, but those hopes were crashed when she tore a ligament in her knee. I can only imagine because of her continuous training and trying to please her parents. In the early years, she was a straight A student, and she was going to this very selective schools that had very high standards, and she managed to keep good grades. But by the end of the 9th grade, her grades in everything but music were not as good. She had a few C's and B's, and she knew that that wasn't going to work with her parents, so she got creative. She kind of made her own report card with glue stick, scissors, and some printing. imagination so she could bring a straight A report card to her parents. But she knew that she had to work on those grades before the final 2 years of high school if she wanted to get into college. After school activities continued to be monitored by her parents, even into her 20s. She was never allowed to go out with friends without close supervision. She had never been drunk or gone to a nightclub, and she felt like she was missing out, really, because of the controlling nature of her parents. In her junior year of high school, she traveled with the school band to Europe, and she was playing the flute for the band. When the band played an auditorium that allowed smoking, Jennifer had an asthma attack. And another kid in the band took her outside and calmed her down. This classmate or bandmate was Daniel, who was described as a chubby, funny, and happy-go-lucky kid. But he was also a part-time pot dealer. Soon enough, they were dating. But she had to hide this relationship from her parents. By the time senior year came, Jennifer's grades were still terrible, and she continued to forge her report cards. She had already been accepted to attend Ryerson University the following year, but she failed her calculus class, so they dropped her. At this point, she was not only not going to this university, but she was not sure if she was going to be able to graduate. So she continued to forge these documents to stay away from trouble with her parents. As far as they knew, she was going to Ryerson. She told them she would take 2 years of science and then transfer to University of Toronto's pharmacology program, just as her father had planned. Her father, Hann, was excited, and he even bought her a new laptop for school. Jennifer was in deep, and she forged receipts for tuition and a $3,000 scholarship. She bought used textbooks, and she would leave every morning for school, but instead of going to school, she took the bus and hung out at a public library all day. She studied scientific subjects and filled her notebooks with notes as if she was going to class. She would also spend a lot of time with Daniel, who was attending York University. She started teaching piano lessons and worked part-time days at the pizza place where Daniel worked as a kitchen manager. It was all a big lie, and when Jennifer arrived home in the evenings, she made up the stories about her lessons, about the teachers, about classmates. She told very few friends of the huge lie that she was telling her parents, because she knew if somebody would open their mouth, she'd be in big trouble. Eventually, Jennifer convinced her parents to let her move in with her friend Topaz. She would only spend 3 nights a week at her place. Topaz lived closer to campus, and she wouldn't have to make the long commute every day, which was another lie. actually moved in with Daniel and his parents, who wanted to meet her parents, but she continued to make an excuse after the next. After 2 years of lying to her parents about going to Ryerson University, it was time to transfer to the University of Toronto. She ended up finding somebody who would fake a transcript. So after graduation from Ryerson was, it was going to be tricky for her. So she came up with this excuse that her graduating class was too large and students would only be allowed one guest. And instead of choosing between mom and dad, she gave her invitation to a friend so that both of her friends' parents could attend. Now, Jennifer's parents still didn't even know that she had a boyfriend. They wouldn't have allowed that. She was living with Daniel 3 nights a week, but she wanted more, so she told her parents that she was going to volunteer at Toronto's hospital for sick children in their blood testing lab. So she would need to stay in the city on the weekends as well. And that's when her parents kind of picked up that she was lying. Her father knew that if she was going to work at the hospital, she would need a uniform, a key card, and she didn't have them. So Hann, her dad, convinced his wife Bich to follow her. But Jennifer knew she was being followed, so Jennifer went to the hospital and sat in a waiting room all day until she was convinced that her mother was gone. But her parents still knew that she was up to something, and the next morning they confronted Topaz, the girl that she was staying with, supposedly, who said that she was sorry, but Jennifer had never lived with her, and that she was actually living with Daniel. So her parents finally confronted Jennifer, and she confessed. She said that she wasn't volunteering at the hospital and she wasn't attending University of Toronto, and that rather she was staying with Daniel. But she still didn't tell them that she had never attended Ryerson University and that she didn't even graduate high school. Jennifer's dad was beyond himself, so he kicked her out of the house. But the mom, who was intervening, she basically asked her daughter to stay. But they forbade Jennifer from leaving the house for 2 weeks. During her time at home, Jennifer's mother spent as much time as she could with Jennifer. Her dad took her phone away, and he insisted in no contact with Daniel or any friends. But her mother eventually would give her the phone for a while and then hide it back. This is what Jennifer wrote in February 2009. This was on her Facebook page. Quote, "Living in my house is like living under house arrest. No one person knows everything about me, and no two people put together knows everything about me. I like being a mystery." End quote. Eventually she got access to her phone, and though she was once she got between teaching piano lessons, she would go to Daniel's house and stay for a while. Her parents eventually allowed her to retake her calculus class to get the one less credit she needed to get her high school diploma. Then she would need to apply for any school that would take her. Her father was convinced that it wasn't too late and she could still become a pharmacy lab technician or a nurse. In the meantime, Daniel was getting sick of all this sneaking around. She was 24 years old, but her parents controlled her life. So eventually, he broke up with her and started seeing another girl, Christine. By then, Jennifer was extremely jealous. So she made up this story to regain his attention. She told Daniel that a man had come to her door claiming to be a police officer and showing his badge, and when she opened the door, a group of men pushed their way into her home and gang raped her. She then told him that the following day, oh my gosh, she's such a loud sleeper. The following day she received a bullet in the mail. I mean, it is just my luck that she has nightmares. I'm sure she's having a nightmare about food or something because she's obsessed with food. Seems like she calmed down. Anyway, Jennifer told Daniel that it was all a warning from his new girlfriend. So she basically told him that she believed that Christine was the one that was trying to keep them apart. By the spring of 2010, Jennifer had had enough. Her father was messing with her life, and so she wanted to end this abuse that she was enduring. So she decided that she wanted her parents dead. And that's when she remembered a story she heard in high school about Andrew Montemayor. So the rumor was that he had robbed people at knife point and that he considered killing his own father. I mean, what a character, right? So she decided to contact this guy. What was his first name? Andrew. And but he didn't want to have anything to do with her plan. But he said that he had a roommate, Ricardo Duncan, that might be interested in helping her. So, according to Jennifer, she paid him $1,500 that she had earned from her piano lessons. And at this point, Jennifer and Daniel were texting again. So she told Daniel about her plan. She explained to Daniel that her parents were worth about $1 million and that she would inherit half of that if they weren't alive. Also, that meant that they could live together and no more sneaking around. Now, during the time where he was dealing weed, Daniel had met a guy by the name of Lanford Crawford, who went by the nickname Homeboy. Daniel thought that if anyone knew how to do something like that, it would be this guy, Homeboy. So he set up a meeting between Jennifer strictly for when they spoke and would then be destroyed after the thing was done. Daniel knew about the plan, and he knew about Jennifer's deepest and darkest secrets, but he was still in love with Christine. So eventually he told Jennifer that he wanted to be out of the whole thing. So she texted him, "So you feel for her what I feel for you? Then call it up with homeboy." And Daniel would say, "I thought you wanted to do this for you." And Jennifer replied, "I do, but I have nowhere to go." Daniel said, "Call it off with homeboy. You said you wanted this with or without me." And so they were discussing it, who she was doing this for. But the next day, Daniel confirmed that everything was still a go. Despite him being in love with Christine, allegedly, he continued to be kind of flirty and have a kind of a interesting relationship with Jennifer. Now, homeboy ended up texting Jennifer on November 2010 saying, "I need time of completion. Think about it." And Jennifer replied, "Today is a no-go. Dinner plans out. We won't be home in time." So eventually, Jennifer and homeboy agreed on a date. Monday, November the 8th. So at 9:30 p.m. on a Monday, on Monday night, Bich was Jennifer's mom. Had just came back from a night of line dancing with her friends. Her husband, Hann, was already in bed. Jennifer's younger brother, Felix, was away at college, and Jennifer was in her room watching TV. So Bich got home, and she was starting to get ready a foot bath with warm water to soak her feet, and watches some TV in the living room before going to bed. At 9:35 p.m., Jennifer comes downstairs and says, "How was your night?" And then she gives her goodnight. And without her mom noticing, she unlocked the front door. Then she went to her room and called homeboy. Had a conversation for 3.5 minutes. By 10:02, Jennifer turned an upstairs bedroom light on, and then 1 minute later, turned it off. That was the signal that the door was unlocked. And that's when she sent the text, "VIP access." Moments later, 3 men came through the unlocked door. Homeboy, David, and Eric. And they all had guns. One of them ran upstairs to the room where Hann was sleeping and put a gun in his face. He demanded that Hann go downstairs where another man was watching over Bich. Bich and Hann, they were speaking in Cantonese to each other. This man ended up saying to shut up and where the money was. Hann assured him he only had $60 in his wallet. And Bich pleaded for her daughter. The third guy, really, Cardi, went upstairs and met with and showed him another 1100 that her mother kept in her nightstand. He then tied her arms behind her back with a shoelace and led her downstairs with her parents. The men took Jennifer back upstairs and tied her to the stairway railing while they took her parents down to the basement. Then 5 shotguns rang out. Hann was shot twice, once in the face and once in the shoulder, and Bich was shot 2 times in the back and once in the head. Bich died instantly, but Hann was bleeding profusely, still alive. After almost 20 minutes, the 3 men, left through the front door, and of course left Jennifer alive upstairs. Jennifer's phone was in one of her pockets, I believe. And despite being tied with her hands behind her back, she pulled the phone out and dialed 911. She reported that someone broke in and that she heard shots. She said that she was tied and she would scream something like, "I'm okay." My dad went outside screaming. They were wondering about the mom, and she was trying to make them hurry. The screaming that was heard 34 seconds into the 911 call was Hann, who was covered in blood and crawled out of the basement and back to the main floor of the house. He then ran outside, screaming as loudly as he could. And the neighbors heard him and called 911 as well. When police arrived, they found Jennifer upstairs, tied to the banister, just as she said. Her flip phone laid on the floor next to her. Her dad was rushed to the hospital, where he was put into a medically induced coma. By 3 a.m., Jennifer was brought in for her first round of questioning. She said that 3 black males got in the house, took whatever money they found, and shot her parents. Police asked her how, she managed to pull her flip phone out of her waistband. That's where she had it, while tied to a banister, but she actually demonstrated. She reached around her waist, flipped the phone open with her thumb, and turned the volume all the way up. She showed by doing this that it was possible, but police still had a lot of questions. If this was actually a robbery, why didn't they take more valuables from the house? Why wouldn't they bring duffel bags or backpacks to carry what they had stolen? Why were they there, the cars, But the biggest question police had was, why did Hann come up the stairs and run outside for help when he knew that his daughter was still in the house? Why didn't he try to help her? So the police set up 24-hour surveillance on Jennifer and even followed her to her mother's funeral. She was not emotional, and she really was not your typical grieving person. But Hann woke up from his induced coma. His neck bone was shattered. Bones in his face were broken near his eye. There were bullet fragments in his his face, and he was barely alive. But he remembered everything and had a story to tell that was very different from Jennifer's. He told police that it was all lies, that it was like everything about her life. He said that when the men rushed in, he was taken downstairs at gunpoint into the living room with his wife. When he looked for his daughter, Jennifer was talking to this guy in a friendly manner. This guy was a white man, and she was walking around the house with him without being tied. Police had already interviewed Jennifer twice, but on November 22nd, they brought her in for a third interview. And 2 hours into the interview, the read technique was used on her, which is a controversial interrogation procedure that they developed in the 50s to try to make somebody confess. It was banned in most European countries because it really uses a series of deceptive techniques, such as lying to the person about the evidence against them and invading their personal space. Now you get an idea of what it looks like. Apparently this method was leading to many false confessions, but it's still used in most of the United States and Canada. So they used this technique, and they told Jennifer that police use satellites and infrared technology to view activity within buildings, and they had software that could tell if a person was lying. Jennifer was okay with the interrogation, but she admitted that she hired them, but not to kill her parents. She told police that she hired them to kill her, that she tried to commit suicide many times, but she failed every time. So basically she hired this hit on herself. She told police that her parents wouldn't allow her to see Daniel, and that she wanted to end her life. She said the men were already outside the house when she decided to call it off, but they wanted money and burst into the house. She said that she couldn't pay them, so they shot her family instead. Of course, police didn't buy this story. They arrested her and brought Daniel in for questioning. And he confirmed that she once again was lying. Despite Jennifer's destroying the SIM card, police were able to recover text messages from her iPhone and Daniel's phone. You can tell that Daniel's name, it's pronounced different in Spanish, and it's messing with my brain. But they confirmed that the arrangement was something, premeditated, and that she hired this hitman. So Jennifer, Daniel, and the 3 men were charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. Jennifer's trial lasted almost 10 months, and she took the stand for 7 days, but it was useless. She was found guilty, and initially she showed no emotions. But once the camera left the room, she started crying uncontrollably. Jennifer Pan was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Daniel and the other guys got all the same sentence. Jennifer was given a non-communication isolation order, so she couldn't have any contact with any other defendants or anyone in her family. When the lawyer became ill, his trial was declared as a mistrial and was postponed in December of 2015. But he ended up pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 18 years in prison with parole eligibility after completing 9 years. Jennifer's dad, Hann, still suffers with his injuries and is unable to work. But he released a statement after the trial. And he said, "When I lost my wife, I lost my daughter at the same time. I don't feel like I have a family anymore. Some say I should feel lucky to be alive, but I feel like I am dead too. I hope my daughter Jennifer thinks about what has happened to her family and can become a good, honest person someday." What a story. Jennifer, her parents, and this plot of interesting people deserve a movie. This does not scream reality. This does not scream true story. It actually, when I read about this case, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it reminded me of a Lifetime movie. If you ever watch one of those, you know what I mean. So many lies and so many manipulations, and how did she get away with it? How? You have to tell me how she got away with all the lies that she told her parents and that she would tell everyone around her. It's beyond me. I just have to say that a lot of people blamed it on the parents for the lying of the daughter, but I have to say that I read stories that, true crime stories where they are the child of an immigrant that is under the same kind of the tiger parenting style, and people move away, They turn 18 and they move to another state. They get accepted in another university, and even if they don't, they get a job somewhere else and they move on with their lives. So yes, I'm sure that her living with her parents is what pushed her over the edge, but it is no excuse for what she did. It is very easy to blame it on the parents, the behavior of the daughter, but I think that we can agree that it takes a different kind of person to pull off what she pulled off here. It is not okay. It's such a tragedy for a family that was trying to run away from something they left behind in their home country, starting over, hoping for the best, and now completely dismantled. And I can't help but feel sad for the ending of this family, because in the end it just